Welcome to Average Joe's Pool. Today we're bringing you another in our series of DIY pool table installation videos, and in this particular video we're going to be showing you how to recloth your rails. Now the cloth we're using in this video is a Simonis. This is Simonis 860 HR, and this is being installed on a Olhausen Grand Champion 3 table. But the basic process that you'll see in this video remains the same regardless of the brand of cloth that you're using. Speaking of which, if you haven't already bought your pool table cloth, there's a couple of important things that you should take into consideration. Firstly, it's important if you can to try and buy your pool table cloth with what's called pre-cut rails. And what that means is you get one large piece of cloth for covering the bed of the table, and then in addition you get 6 separate strips, one for each of your rails. Now the alternative to that is you just get one large piece of uncut material and a cutting pattern, and you have to cut the rails yourself. If you haven't done that before, so that can be a little bit tricky, you don't want to make any mistakes, and generally having pre-cut rails doesn't increase the price, so it's definitely a feature you should be looking out for. When it comes to using a Simonis cloth like we are today, many people consider this to be the best pool table cloth in the world. Obviously it is one of the more expensive models as well, but often you'll find that Simonis cloth does not come with the rails pre-cut, and so it depends on the supplier that you buy it from as to whether they choose to pre-cut the rails for you. However, the supplier we buy from does always pre-cut the rails, and these are available to buy on Amazon. And so we'll add Amazon links for the 860 HR and also other models of Simonis cloth into the video description below. With regards to pricing, for a 9-foot table, the 860 HR by Simonis here, you're looking at about $370, so it is pretty pricey. And a decent alternative, if your budget's a little bit tighter, would be Champion cloth, and that comes in at around $180 to $190 for a 9-foot table. And if your budget's even tighter, there are also cheaper cloths available as well, and we will add all of those links into the video description below for various cloths at various budgets. So if this video turns out to be helpful for you, please help support what we do here at Average Joe's Pool and be sure to use our Amazon links. And the second factor you may well want to consider, there's 2 basic types of pool table cloth. There's worsted and there's napped. Now the ideal choice for your pool table might well vary depending on what country you're watching from. And if you're unsure of the differences and which one would suit you best, we have done a separate video, worsted versus napped, and we will add a link to that video in the video description below if you need it. So let's get stuck into removing the old cloth, and you'll see that we filmed this process on our older Brunswick table. Now one really important thing before you go ahead and you remove your old cloth is you want to have a good look at it, particularly the finish inside the pockets. Now the reason for that is when you come into the pocket, when you're fitting the cloth, as you'll see, you have staples that are on the inside of the pocket here. Now the reason for that is because when you finish the pockets, you actually put staples in the end of the cloth. So once you put your pocket liner or whatever type of pocket you have in there, you've got to make sure that the staples finish in a position where you can't see them, and of course that the balls can't hit them. And so it's always a really good idea before you remove that old cloth to have a look at the ends, maybe take a couple of photographs for reference and see exactly the way that they finish that cloth off in that pocket and exactly the position of those final staples, because that does vary a little bit between different makes and models. That's of course assuming that you were happy with the position of the staples before and you couldn't see them before. If you could, the chances are you're going to make them a little bit deeper into the pocket on your new installation. So it's really important to try and be prepared with this, so always have a really good look at the ends where the cloth finishes inside the pockets. Speaking of which, it's also really important to realise when it comes to pool tables, we have 2 types of ends when it comes to the rails. We have the corner pockets, which is what we can see here, which actually have quite an extreme angle, and then we also have our centre pockets, and our centre pockets, rather than being an extreme angle, are really shallow in angle. And the process for finishing a centre pocket is slightly different to the process of finishing one of your corner pockets. So again, when you come to take a look, make sure you look at both a centre pocket finish and also a corner pocket finish. And once you're armed with that information, we can jump into the job. Let's go. So the first thing we need to do obviously is to remove the rails from your pool table. And a quick tip for you, when you do that, it's always a good idea to mark them up. So you can see we've got a number 6 right in the middle there. So if you number them as you take them off, then when you come to put your pool table back together again, you know that this rail is going to go back in exactly the same position that you removed it from. So first thing we want to do is flip it over, and we've got all of these staples on the underneath, and all of these need to be removed. One of the best little tools you can get for helping you remove staples is this type of tool we have right here. This has this little hinged head which helps you grip onto the staple once you've got the first bit underneath it, and that'll help you to remove the whole thing. They're not very expensive, under $10, and as before we will add some Amazon links into the video description below, but these are really handy, especially when you've got hundreds of staples to undo. So now I've got all of our staples removed, we're just going to remove the cloth. So I'm going to flip this over. I've got this marked as number 5. So flip it over and pull the cloth back. Now, it's always a good idea before we remove this feather strip, just put a line on the top of the feather strip, approximately halfway along, and just follow that line down onto the rail there. And also, because we know this is number 5, I'm going to put a number 5 on there. So all of my feather strips will be numbered up when I come to put them back. I've got a number 3 written there. I'm going to cross that out. So I've got number 5 written there. So ready for me. You need to put that same feather strip back into this same rail. Okay, to get the feather strip out, first thing, give your cloth a little bit of a tug and see how hard in it is. Sometimes it'll come out fairly easily. This end's come out nice and easily. See the cloths come out of there nice and easily, but on the other end here it seems to be, there we go, in there fairly firm. This one's not too bad. Sometimes they're really tight. Looks like I've got a slight close to a break in that. You're going to be careful with these feather strips. Ideally, obviously, you don't want to snap these, and they are quite soft, especially for the amount of pressure that you can put on these. So if you get to a point like that where it's just not moving, I've got a couple of tips to help you out. So what I've got here is just a thick kebab skewer. If you put this in under the feather strip, now grab my rubber mallet and I'll just give that a few taps to start feeding that in underneath the feather strip. And then once that's in, what you can do is you can use that. You've almost got double the wood there, so you've almost got double the strength. So when you're lifting up, you're actually lifting with 2 pieces of wood rather than 1. If you do get to a point like this where it's a little bit stubborn, you can try one of 2 things. One is to tap it in a little bit further, and try lifting it again. Yeah, that's worked. However, if you get to a point where that's not quite working and it's still stuck, even with the kebab skewer on the bottom, then if you grab your putty knife and just put that underneath, because the putty knife can get in a lot closer to the point of leverage than your fingers can. So I'm going to get my fingers into this point here, but I can get the putty knife all the way in. Don't push it in all the way. Remember, on the other side you've got this nice finish here, so don't push it in too deep. Get it in down there and then just twist it in this direction. And there he comes. So again, if you just use this this kind of little combination, if you get stuck, it's quite a nice kind of workaround. So if you're too heavy-handed with these feather strips, they will snap, and you're just creating unnecessary headache. So you just spend a couple of minutes on each one, you should get them out fairly easily. Now ours is just about to break there, so I'm actually going to snap that off there. It doesn't matter if these break, we'll show you how to do a little repair on these. It's really not the end of the world. But obviously, if you can avoid it, that's always best too. Now, if you do get a broken feather strip, like we've got here, it's really not the end of the world. You can just put these 2 pieces back together and just put the whole thing back in. Or if you prefer, what you can do is you can put a bit of wood glue on there, or even some quickset epoxy, clamp that down and put it back to one piece. But it really isn't a biggie. Don't worry too much about it, especially if it's kind of a break in the middle of 2 long sections like this. That's kind of less of an issue than if you kind of break the last inch off of one end. But it's really not the end of the world. It does happen. These are quite soft. What I'm going to do is just going to make sure, because I've numbered these, I'm going to make sure I've got both halves correctly numbered before I move on. So just quickly going to show you one of the ways to fix a snapped feather strip. We had a couple that snapped. It does happen, you can't help it sometimes, but it's not the end of the world. We'll show you how to fix it. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a 5-minute epoxy and basically going to put it into a clamp. Now before I clamp it, I'm just going to protect the faces of my clamp here, so I don't really want to get the epoxy all over the clamp. I'm just going to mix up a small amount of this epoxy. We don't need very much. And just before you apply it, just make sure that it looks like it's going to fit back together okay. I've already checked this one. But just make sure it looks like it's going to go back together. And assuming that we're good, let's get it epoxied. Just fit the two halves back together. Wipe off any excess so it dries nice and flat, and then we'll get that clamped up. And this is a 5-minute epoxy. I'm going to leave it longer than that, probably going to give that probably at least 15 minutes. So here's our feather strip. It's had a good probably 45 minutes, moving on with other jobs. So it should be sat by now. Yeah, that's looking good. Looking good. If you do have a bit of epoxy like we've got here, you can just grab your kind of sanding block, just give that a bit of a sand off there, just make sure that's nice and flat. But that's a pretty good, solid repair there. So this feather strip's good to be reused. So you've now got your old cloth removed and completely out of the way, and we're good to start the clothing process. As you can see, we're now working on a different rail. This is on a brand new table that we've got here. This is an Olhausen Grand Champion 3 that we're working on today. Now it's important to realise when you're working on rails is that your end rails, your foot and your head rails are completely different to your side rails. And the reason being, of course, is on this is an end rail, and so on this side we've got a corner pocket, which has got quite a big angle, and on this side we've also got a corner pocket, so the angles are both quite extreme. However, on your side rails you'll have one side that's a corner pocket, that'll be an extreme angle, but then the other one of course is your center pocket, and that's a much shallower angle. And the process for finishing off a corner pocket is different to the process of finishing off that narrower angle on our center pockets. So first of all we're going to be focusing on an end rail, so of course on an end rail we have only corner pockets, so that's a good place to start. So because this is a brand new table, I'm just going to get rid of the tape that's holding the feather strip in. Now you already would have marked up the centre of your feather strip, but as this is a brand new table we need to do that now. So I just want to make sure that we're square on both ends. And assuming we're happy there, I'm just going to mark the approximate centre, doesn't have to be exact. And we're just going to follow that down so it goes across our feather strip all the way down to the top of our cushion here. And I have already numbered these rails, so I know that this feather strip will definitely go back into this rail. So once we've done all that, what we can do is we can just lift our feather strip out and we can put that to one side. Always a good idea to make sure there's no bits of old cloth or any wood shavings or anything down in the groove here. And next let's take a look at our cloth. So this is our Simonis, this is 860 HR in tournament blue, and we thankfully have our rails pre-cut for us. Now it's important to realise when it comes to pool table cloth there is a face side and a rear side. It's not the same on both sides. This is actually the rear that I'm looking at. Now on the rear side of the cloth it's actually kind of a little bit rougher than the front side of the cloth. I'm going to fold that over. You can get a quick shot of that there. You should notice this has got, you can see how fine the grain is, the weave on this side, and the rear there almost has a slightly kind of fuzzy look to it. That's the unfinished side. So this nice smooth side with that nice tight weave, that's our playing surface. So take your cloth and you want it with the rear of the cloth facing up at this stage. And you want to make it so you've got the same amount of overhang approximately on both of your ends. And the reason that the cloth must be the rear side up is because when our feather strip goes on, obviously this is going to be folded over the top, and we want our finished surface on the top. So it must be the rear of your cloth at this stage, and must be facing upward, nice and even. Just have a quick feel, make sure you've got enough distance so that when you press that down, there's still going to be enough cloth left. Good rule of thumb is to follow the edge of the cushion rubber here. To make sure we can see my little centre mark, just there. I'm going to line up my feather strip centre mark with the centre mark, which is just there. Like so. Let's give that a light tap. Start to get that sunk in. Perfect. So now you want to give your cloth a light stretch outwards. You don't want to be pulling it very hard. Just see that kind of bounce that's got in it. Just take that bounce out of it. It's almost like like a very, very light pull. Just going to pull that across, and then you can start working this along. Now, very importantly, when you get to the end here, what we need to do is actually bring a little bit of cloth through. And that's because when we fold it over, we're going to need to kind of almost bend the cloth around the underside when we come to staple it on. So this helps make life that little bit easier. So what I'm going to do, so we've got this this angle here, where our facing is. What I want to do is come about halfway down that angle. There. So about a little over, just about there is perfect. Then we'll set that in. Again, same thing here, light stretch. And the end here, remember we want to pull this through to about that level there, so you make it almost making an equal-sided triangle, just there. Now, one important thing to note is when you pull this across, like I said, that's going to make life easier when we come to work on the underside. Now, one thing to note is when you turn this over, you'll note you get this little bit of a baggy material just here. And you see when we start doing the stapling, but it's important when you're pulling it through from the underside to actually make sure that you kind of come back under and you start massaging this this part through, because you are going to get that little bit there. So when we're stapling, you'll see in a minute, this is the bit that I'll be referring to that we need to make sure that we massage out as we bring the cloth along. Let's have a quick feel across the top of your feather strip here. It should feel relatively smooth to the top when you're working from the underside here. If you've got a little high spot, just give it a little light tap. Doesn't need much. Now, one thing to note with the feather strip is we're going to set the final position of the feather strip at the end of the process. So when you flip your cloth over, you'll feel that it's actually slightly raised. But that's completely normal. Like I said, it's not completely set yet. So what we've got basically at the moment is you may have your feather strip and it might be quite flush to this, but then of course when you fold your cloth over the top, it's actually creating it, making it slightly raised. But we'll get that down nice and flush at the end of the process. Now, just a quick tip for you working with the feather strips. This one's going in nice and tight. We've got our Simonis cloth here, which is quite a heavy weight, heavy duty cloth. So this is we've got quite a nice tight fit, so this cloth isn't going anywhere. However, if you're working on a used table and it's had the cloth changed, the feather strips are a little bit older, maybe you're working with a slightly lighter weight of cloth, then what you can find sometimes, that even when you've tapped that all the way in, is you can pull it here and it will start to pull back through. The feather strip isn't holding the cloth in particularly well. Now, there's a few ways to get around that problem. One is to, if you grab a small block of wood and put the corner of that wood on there, you can tap it down very carefully and that will push the feather strip further down into the groove. You do have to be careful that you're using the very corner of the wood, because of course you don't want to damage the top there. However, the problem with that is it does push the feather strip down, and so you might have a slight indentation when you finish the process. The feather strip will be sitting low in relation to the rail. It's not the end of the world, but it's, if you can avoid that, it's better to. Another option might be to get an additional bit of scrap material, and you can pack out the trough either on just one side or two sides or three sides if you really need to. Just to essentially, it's like making your cloth thicker, so you can get a little secondary strip of cloth, put it along there, and then hit both of those bits of cloth into that trough, into the feather strip trough there, and then hopefully that will give you the extra grip that you need. And if you still can't get that to work, then chances are you may well have the incorrect size feather strips, because they shouldn't be rattling around that much. Another option that people go for is you can of course put a staple, knock these all the way down, that's still not enough. You can put a staple, it has to be a fairly long-legged staple, through the feather strip itself, down into the timber of your rail here. However, that's kind of a last resort really. If you do that, you only want to do it if you've got like one or two places that are particularly slipping, it keeps slipping here. Might put one staple in there. You certainly don't want to go along and put a staple every inch. That's just a couple of tips for you, just in case your feather strip is playing up a little bit. So next I'm just going to flip this around. What I'm going to be doing next is we need to trim off some of this excess cloth. So you want to make sure you've got a nice sharp blade, brand new blade, and you're just going to be carefully trimming along here. A couple of things to be careful of, obviously, is your main cloth. You do not want to be cutting into this. This is why I've got the cloth there facing me. It's my preference, as people do it in different ways, and you want to have nice control over that knife. You don't want to be losing control of it, because of course even if you lost control in that direction you could end up damaging the rubber of your cushions here. You want to take this cut in right to the very corner of your feather strip there. Just there. So we just cut that off. Now you will find you've got lots of little threads. If you kind of pull the thread, it'll come to a point where it naturally stops. Just chop it off. Again, you just need to make sure your knife's nice and sharp for this. You want to clean this up as much as you can, because of course we don't want, when we fold this over, we don't want anything that you can feel on the underside of it. So you do want to get these cut back nice and tight. So the loose threads that I'm pulling out is the thread that's running in that direction. However, you can see we've got this kind of fluffy bit left in the centre. This is where it was a little bit shorter, and this is the ends of the threads that are running in this direction. Unfortunately, these are a little bit trickier to get rid of. So if you have these bits like we have here, one way to get rid of them is if you turn it up and cut along the very gently along the edge of the feather strip. Again, you need to keep control of the knife. You don't want to slip, because if you slip, you could slip and cut your cloth here. Actually using my fingers as a guide across the rubber cushion, and I'm not putting much pressure on at all. Remember, we're only cutting through little cotton threads. It's not the hardest things to cut in the world. I'd rather do 5 or 6 really soft passes, knowing that I can't really slip, rather than try and do them in one pass and end up slipping. Probably through there, let's have a feel. Get most of the way through. see, that allows you to get rid of these little straggly bits in the opposite direction here. So obviously just take your time with this, just get it nice and clean, as clean as you can get it, and you can move on. But like I said before, take your time, make sure your cuts are controlled, always kind of control your hand, you don't want it to slip, don't be pressing hard, keep everything nice and light. Okay, so I've tidied that up. I'm just going to get rid of these bits of thread. And basically you want to try and keep your workspace relatively clean, because you don't want any of these bits getting under the cloth and creating little lumps under your cloth. So next we've got our excess cloth here, just cut it off with a few inches to spare. So now we need to make a small cut in the cloth, just so when we turn the cloth over it becomes easier to work with. Now I'm going to explain this for you. This is obviously the feather strip, and the feather strip is sat inside that little trough. Draw that for you. So that, if you imagine, if you looked at the end of your rail, would be like that. That's exactly what you're looking at when you look at the end of your rail. Now the cut that we're looking to make is actually on this front corner. So what we need to do is put the tip of our knife down to this corner, and we're going to bring it up so that we cut the material there. So we're not at the back, we're right here on this front corner. So again, imagine you're looking at it sideways, this front corner right here, tip of the knife is going to go down to that front corner, and we're going to bring it up. So it's down in this front corner, down at the bottom there. So putting our blade down is that bottom front corner, as I just showed you, and we're bringing that up. Just to put a little cut in there. Now we come to the other side, do exactly the same thing. Again, it's the front corner. So if you're looking at the end of the rail, it'll be there. This is our front corner, and we're coming up there. So this corner on the front corner, up. So now I'm just going to flip the rail over. Make sure that the cloth is still folded upwards. Like so. So what we currently have, where this ends, that's the corner of our feather strip there. Now depending on what your particular pool table is, your facing may well end there, and you may well be able to see the feather end of the feather strip there. However, ours is extended. Ours goes to goes slightly past the far side of our feather strip, so we can't actually see it. But it doesn't make any difference. You can kind of feel where the cloth finishes. The cloth finishes right there. What we want to do here is we want to cut away a little bit of the excess. So if you get this so that it's level with the bottom of the facing, this little scrap bit of material here. Imagine that's one side of a triangle, and then what we want to do is we want to match that coming out the other direction. So it's going to be somewhere right around there. So nice approximately even angles on the top of the triangle there. Finishing at the point here where the cloth is cut to at the end of the feather strip. And using some decent fabric scissors, we just want to cut that back, basically cut that triangle out and get rid of that. Then repeat that exact same thing on the opposite side. So now we'll flip the rail over again. What we want to do at this stage is it's a good idea to get a dry brush and just give it a quick brush over just to get rid of any little frayed bits of material, just so they're not going on the underside of your cloth. Make sure everything's nice and clean before we flip it over. Now we can fold our cloth over and turn the whole thing upside down. It's worth noting that some rails have a small indented section specifically for the staples to go into, which we're going to be doing in a moment. We're going to start the stapling process. This is an Olhausen Grand Champion 3 we're working on today. Olhausen don't tend to have the staple indents. Now, it doesn't really make a big difference either way. The nose height of the cushion will still be the same because obviously they've allowed for the thickness of the cloth. However, if you do have that indentation, it normally runs about ½ an inch or so all the way across, and you'll find that it comes to the corner and also runs slightly up the corner. I've got some footage of an older Brunswick table that we'll show you now. That'll give you an idea of what the indentation looks like for the staples. And if you do have that indentation there, then you want to make sure that all of your staples definitely go into that little kind of ½ inch just at the start there. So you want to make sure that all the staples are in that indented section. Likewise, at the end of the process, when you trim this cloth back, the cloth should end also all within that indented section. However, as I mentioned, on the Olhausen that we have here, it doesn't have them. It's not a problem at all. We'll still make our staples fairly near the front. Again, probably ½ an inch in or so, and we'll run that down in a straight line. So on our corner pockets, the first staple that we're actually going to put in is right on our corner just here. So we're not going to start from the centre. Instead, we're going to make sure that we get both of our corners pinned in place first. Now, to get it around this corner, we need to kind of pull the material. And if you get your thumb here, just about an inch or so from the end, pull it slightly in this direction, not too hard, and then straight in that direction. So first of all, this direction. That will help take out a little bit that gather material that we mentioned on the other side, and then across to the side. And then at that point, what we want to do is take it up and onto that corner right there. And that's where we're going to put our first staple, just to hold it in place there. About an inch or so from the end there. You want to pull in this direction, there, and then in that direction. So 1, 2, up, onto the corner right here. And that's where we want to get a staple. 1, 2. Exactly the same on the other side, about an inch from the end. Put it straight out in this direction and then that direction. Now if you find you haven't got your thumb quite in the right place, if you come up a bit short, just let go of it. Do it again, you can kind of get a feel for the right position. What we're looking to do is grab that material, pull it that way, then pull it this way and take it up and over this corner. So for our next stage, we're going to start from the centre and work our way outwards. Now when you're stapling along the centre here, the important thing to note is you don't want to pull it too tight. If you pull it really tight, you'll get a slight indentation in the bottom of the cushion there. You're actually deforming the rubber of the cushion there. It's actually quite soft. However, you do want to pull it, you don't want to pull it too tight, but you want it fairly snug. So the trick is, if you pull it fairly snug up with your thumb, obviously my thumb's touching the cloth there, and so the indentation is appearing right here, directly underneath my thumb. Rather than pull it up and staple underneath my thumb, what I'll do is I'll pull it up, and just in case we get an indentation, I'm going to be going slightly towards the thumb, so that basically allows it to release a little bit each time I do it. So I'm not stapling under my thumb, I'm pulling it up and stapling to the side of my thumb. Move it, staple to the side of my thumb, to the side of my thumb. So I'm never locking this part in, if that makes any sense. And again, as long as you don't pull too tight, you should be able to avoid this. So we're going to pull up, not too hard, and staple next to your thumb. And then you want to do this kind of, every inch would probably be a little bit too much, every ½ inch is probably a little bit too little. You're better off doing a few too many than a few too little. So remember, as we're doing this, I'm always doing it to the side of my thumb. And we want to pause about 6 or 7 inches from our corner, just there. And the reason they have to stop 6 or 7 inches from the end is going back to that piece of little bit of material that you get, about 3 or 4 inches from the end that I mentioned earlier. As we can see, thankfully it's not too bad. A little bit of a looseness there, It's not too bad at all. Sometimes you can see almost like a small little baggy area. That's not too bad at all. Now what we do to get rid of that is as we do our lifts, what we need to actually do is come under here and make sure that we're pushing, almost massaging the kind of baggy area out of it. So you're almost kind of almost coming under this and pulling it up as far as you can. So you're making sure that we're definitely pulling from all the way down here rather than from just here. So you massage it up, staple, make sure you massage it up with each staple. Like I said, we haven't got much to get rid of there, but you may have a little bit more. So again, just massage it up, stapling to the side of the thumb. So next we're going to carry on from the centre up to our other corner. This time it's going to be a little bit more difficult because obviously I'm still right-handed, but I'm going in the opposite direction. Before I was stapling in front of my thumb. This time what I'm going to be doing is I'm lifting it up and actually stapling just behind my thumb. So again, I want to stop stapling when I get about 6 or 7 inches from my corner just here. So I need to flip this over and have a look. Oh, again, this isn't too bad at all. So not a lot to massage out there, but again, if yours has, just remember what you're trying to do is kind of almost come under the cloth a little bit to try and draw it all the way around whilst massaging it a little bit from the other side. So I kind of demonstrate it. Like I said, I haven't got much to take out here, which is nice. Now this next part will vary a little bit depending on your particular make and model of pool table. Remember we mentioned near the start of the video that it's always a good idea to have a look at your old cloth before you remove it and have a look where these final staples are positioned. The reason being, of course, is what you would now ideally try and do is you try and match that, and so you get your staples in the same place that they were before, provided of course you were happy with how they were before. And there are quite a few variables. You've got things like your facings. Your facings can finish on either side of the feather strip there, and so that will affect where you put the final staple. And also you do have to be a little bit careful. You know, we've got a brand new table here, for example, so we don't have a guideline to follow as to where the final staple should be. But what you're aiming to do is make sure that you get your staples so that they're completely out of sight, so that once your pockets go in, and these are the pockets for this particular table, but you may have obviously different type of pockets. When the pockets actually go in, you need to make sure that the staples are completely hidden. So this will give you an idea of where the staples can be, because you don't want to end up with your staples being too far forward, because there's a chance that you may be able to see them, and even worse, if you come even further forward, there's a chance that the balls might even be able to touch them. So it is important on this part right here that those end staples do go into the correct place, and like I said, unfortunately that does vary a little bit table to table. Now if you're unsure, like I mentioned, grab one of your pockets and put that in place, and that will give you the kind of exact idea as to the furthest forward that staple can be. And as long as you make sure that you're behind that, then you know that you're good. But regardless of the make and model of your table, the basic kind of principle is the same. We need to get this stapled up on the inside facing of our pocket somewhere. And then in addition to that, obviously we're going to need to finish this around the facing. So let's have a look at finishing this corner pocket on this Olhausen. So the basic principle is you basically need to roll this material up. And so by rolling it up, that gives you something that you can actually staple into the face here. Now, how much material you need to roll up is going to vary, because it's going to vary on the direction that you need to pull it. On this old house, we're probably going to be pulling it down somewhere in this direction to get our staples in fairly close to the end of our facing here. Whereas on other tables, you might be pulling almost straight down in this direction. And so then, of course, you need to roll it a little bit more material. What you can do is you can kind of fold it underneath and have a feel for the angle that you're trying to get to, and have a feel to see if it kind of feels about right. If it doesn't, especially if you're getting like little baggy bits of material, try either making it smaller so it's a bit of a tighter roll, see if that makes it better, or bring a little bit of material out. And like I said, that's going to vary depending on what angle you need. So let's have a little feel for the angle. I'm trying to make sure that I'm nice and tight in this corner. So I'm happy right there. That's the end of the facing just there, so I'm going to put a staple about ½ an inch below that. So now we've got that stapling on the side. If you take a look at what's needed to finish this, usually you kind of get a feel for it, you can usually stretch it a little bit. And what you're looking for is to try and get a nice even stretch around this area, and kind of you're trying to form the whole thing around. See, it's just starting to take shape there. But what we don't want is to try and trap in like a sharp edge, almost like a corner. That's what we want to try and avoid. So we're trying to kind of bend that, almost kind of form it around this side. So at this stage it's got a tiny little baggy bit just in the corner there, so I can pull that up and out. And I think what I'll do is I'll put another staple next to this one and then close it off. Now I need to repeat this process on the opposite side. Okay, so coming over to the other side, just a quick thing here. Yours should be kind of flipped over already, but we've got this extended facing that goes past the opposite side of our feather strip. So it's a good idea just to flip it over if you can. Just tuck it into the gap that is the feather strip there. And like I said, you may not have that problem, depends on the length of your facing. This one is quite a long one. And flip it over, I'm going to start to look at rolling it up. A reminder on this, what we're looking for is the right angle. So you're looking to see how much material you need to roll and the angle that you're going to need to pull. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I don't have any spare material gathered on the corner here. I want that nice and straight there. So if I put too much roll on it, try and pull it back, you can kind of get a feel for what happens there. Got baggy material there. So to find the right amount of material, pull it across at the angle that you think that you need. Not quite there, try a little bit more, and you can vary the angle a little bit as well. That's about perfect there. The end of my facing is just there, so I'm going to go down about ½ an inch beyond that. So I'll put this back down, and then again have a little kind of feel for how much material it is that you need to gather. Sometimes you have to slacken this very corner one off again. If he's a little bit too far over, this one might be a touch. Yeah, I'm going to take this one out just a touch. Yeah, that's better. Then you can kind of see it taking shape there. Now on the corner here, on that way, one here to finish. So now grab a decent set of fabric scissors, and we're going to trim in behind these staples. Again, if you've got that indented groove on the bottom of your rails, try and make sure that you're cutting the material so it also finishes in that groove. So the final thing we want to do to finish off our rail is to set our feather strip into its final position. As I mentioned earlier in the video, you may have already had to put your feather strip all the way down depending on the weight of the cloth and the age of the feather strips and all that kind of stuff. If your feather strips are nice and fairly new, you should find at this stage that they are still sticking up a little bit when you feel it from the back. And so what we want to do now is we want to set it so it's nice and flush with the top of our rails. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to grab our rubber mallet, and we'll be using a bit of a scrap cloth to help protect the finish here. But all we're going to be doing is hitting it literally across the feather strip. So the feather strip hits in the center of the hammer, and our top of our rail here will actually stop the feather strip going in too deep. So you're almost using the top of the rail here as a guide to set the feather strip into the correct depth. So all we do is grab a piece of scrap material. I don't know how well that will show up on the video, but you'll actually see, you'll just be able to see the very front edge of that timber. It should be absolutely perfectly flush as you run your finger across it. Then just check for any high spots. I can feel I've got one slight high spot remaining just there. Perfect. And obviously repeat that for the other half as well. So that's an end rail now completed. So an end rail obviously has two corner pockets. As we can see, you've got no stretch marks, no puckering across the nose of the cushion, nice and smooth all the way along. So next we need to take a look at doing a side rail, and obviously a side rail is going to differ because we have one corner pocket and one centre pocket. So let's have a look at that next. So we're now moving on to our side rails. As you can see on this Olhausen, this is the Grand Champion 3 model, and on here the side rail is a single side rail rather than two separate side rails. So as you can see, we've got the centre pocket right here, and there's no break or join across here. It's literally one long rail that goes down the entire side of the table. And of course the main difference here is the angle that we've got coming off the cushion here. When we were working on our corner pockets that we've just finished on, you've got a much steeper angle. They're kind of almost that kind of angle. Whereas here on our centre pockets, we've got a much shallower angle. So the basic principle on how to cover this rail does remain the same. However, finishing this corner will be different. And of course, it really doesn't matter whether you have two separate rails or you have one long rail like we have on this Olhausen. The principle is exactly the same. However, when you've got a single rail, it can be a little bit trickier to work on, because what you need to move around and turn over and spin around and all the rest of it, it's obviously a much bigger piece. But the basic principle on how to recloth it remains the same. It doesn't matter whether it's two short ones or one long one like we have here. So first thing to do is we need to mark our feather strip if it's not already marked. So I'm just going to make sure that we're definitely, the feather strip is definitely centered. And then I'm going to put a mark down just here and follow that on down. And make sure you've also numbered the feather strip as well. This is B2 for me, and also B2 there. I can go ahead and get this feather strip removed and put that to one side. So as before, just grab a dry brush, make sure that there's no old remnants of wood, particles, chippings, old bits of cloth, and make sure that you've got a nice clean channel there ready for the feather strip to go back into when we get to that stage. So now let's grab your rail cloth. You may notice on this one it's got this this edge. This is the finished edge where Simonis actually come to the edge of their cloth. So that's the very outside of the cloth before these sections are cut away from it. It's always best not to put this into the channel that the feather strip goes into. Make that the bit that gets folded underneath, and obviously that can be cut off at the end. So let's lay this cloth down. So a reminder again, there is a front and a rear to cloth, and you want the back of the cloth facing up, and we want to get it so you've got about an even overhang on both of your ends. As a general guideline, I've just brought it down approximately flush with the edge of the rubber here. Seems to work quite well on these models. So now we're going to take our feather strip, make sure it's the right feather strip, make sure it's the right way around, and we're going to line up the center mark. And then a couple of light taps in the centre. So we'll go towards our corner pocket to start off with, and we've just done this previously. So remember, we want to put that slight amount of stretch on the cloth. You don't want to pull it hard, just that amount of springiness that the cloth has to it. Just take some of that out, just there. And then start to put the feather strip in. Finishing about 6 or 7 inches from the end. Just there. And remember the triangle setup that we had here. We want to bring this cloth through so it's halfway up this side of our imaginary triangle. So now we do the same thing, this time coming towards our centre pocket. So again, we're not looking to pull it, just that amount of springiness that the cloth naturally has. Just take a little bit of that tension up. And again, finishing about 5 or 6 inches from the end here. Again, we're going to do a small pull down here, and this time, obviously we don't have a triangle to work from. Imagine we've got this edge here where the feather strip is, and this edge here. We want to go halfway between the two. So I'm going to pull the cloth down to about this level here. Make sure that your feather strip is definitely nice and secure. You're not looking to sink it all the way down, you just need to make sure that it's definitely going to hold your cloth. Feels solid all the way along. So now you're going to grab your knife, and we need to trim off our excess. And as a reminder, you trim all the way down into the corner of the feather strip right there. And just a quick reminder to get this as tidy as you can. Any little loose threads, just very carefully start to cut these off. Want as little going under the cloth as possible when it gets folded over. So next we need to do this little slice just on the front here, just like we did on our end rails. And just a quick reminder for you, if you look on the end of it, this is the that kind of channel that our feather strip sits inside. And this is the front of the rail here, so the rubber here. So this is the front, that's the back, this is the bottom. And the edge that I'm looking to cut is on the very front. Putting my knife down to this corner and bringing it up there, just to put a small cut just up the one side of the channel. You don't want to cut the back, you don't want to cut the bottom, just this front edge. And then we want to do exactly the same cut on the other side. So you do exactly the same cut. It doesn't matter whether it's a corner or a centre pocket. They both get that little cut there. So next I'm going to flip the rail over. So I'm just going to give the work surface here a quick clean. I don't want any bits of thread. And likewise, just give this a quick flick over. So now let's just flip this over. Keep the cloth pulled down. There. So on our corner pocket, for cutting this bit of material away, just remember, like we did before, that's the end of our cut there. If you line this edge up with the bottom of our facing, in there, and then we'll match this angle here coming out the other way from the end of our cut, so about there, somewhere right around there. So be careful, you're only cutting through the one piece of cloth. Just cut that up to meet the cut end. That's our scrap. On our centre pocket here, what we want to do is make sure that this side of our material matches the angle here. And we want to come off where our end of our cut is, which should be around the end of our facing there. And we want to go directly away from, so I'm cutting straight into the angle of the facing there. So that would be the line that I want to cut right there. So on our centre pocket here, to get our staples started, what we want to do is just take a little bit of the slack out. Again, you're not trying to pull it hard. A little bit of the slack that way, a little bit that way. Not very much. I'm just going to fold that over. I'm going to get a couple of staples up in the top edge here. So again, this direction, just a little bit. Not pulling very hard. Just fold it over, sit it on top. Again, you don't want to pull this very hard. So next come to the other end, which of course is a corner pocket. We're going to do exactly the same as we did when we had two corner pocket ends. So we're going to pull it straight in this direction, straight in that direction, and up over the corner here. Staple in here. So now come back to the centre pocket end, and we're going to continue these staples. So again, you want to pull it, staple just in front of your thumb, and do that all the way down until you get, remember on the other end we want to stop about 6 or 7 inches from the end just to massage out that bit of material. So I'm going to start from the centre pocket, working backwards, stopping 6 to 7 inches from the end. Remember, don't pull it too hard, and you're stapling in front of your thumb. So remember, finishing 6-7 inches from the end here, and this is to allow us to massage out this, that's not too bad, got a little bit in there. So again, what you want to do is just kind of massage that out to the top. So when you put your next screw in, your staple in, massage that up and around the corner, staple in here. I think we've got all the slack now. Yeah, that's looking good. So now I'm going to finish off the corner pocket. It's exactly the same as before, unfortunately, as mentioned before. It is going to vary a little bit for your particular make and model of table. But this one, I just want to make sure that I've freed this, just because this comes past, there we go. That goes past the corner of my feather strip there. Then we need to fold our material over and look for the perfect position where we can pull in the direction that we need to get rid of any spare material here. And what we're looking for is the kind of the fold that we need here, so that we can pull this across at a good angle, nice and tight, so we're not getting a gathering of material just here. So somewhere near there looks pretty good. So now just have a little feel for how much material you need to gather. That's not too bad, this one. You can kind of see it, they're almost there. And remember, if you need to take this this one right in the corner out to give yourself a little bit more space, sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't, but you can if you need to. We're pretty close there. I'm just going to pull this up and make sure it's nice and flat across my facing. Just going to pulling it up towards that corner there. Just trying to make sure I've got this is flat and I've got almost nothing to try and iron out between the other ones there. And so my staples will come up here, so somewhere in about there. It's perfect. And then one final staple just to join those two. So now we're moving on to our centre pocket, and of course our centre pocket is completely different to finishing a corner pocket. It's worth noting with the centre pocket as well, again this might vary a little bit on table to table, as in where these staples need to finish on the inside face here. So hopefully you've got old staple holes, or you had a good look at it before you started, so you know where the cloth should end and where those final staples should be. And as we demonstrated before, if you're not sure, if it's a brand new table, you can always attach a pocket and kind of see how far back into the pocket you need to be. What you don't want to be doing is having visible staples. So when you do this, it's a good idea to push this spare material a little bit back into the pocket just before we start, not too much. So I've got a metal rule here, and all this does, it just helps me create a nice decent clean fold. What we want to do is we want to take our fold down using our ruler right the way to the bottom of the facing, because when you fold it back up, you don't want the secondary material, the second part of material, coming halfway across your facing. So you end up with a ridge in the middle of your facing there. So make sure you push that all the way down, and you can look at bringing the other piece of material up. Remember, what we're looking for here is a nice clean line that follows the exact corner of our cushion here. You don't want to be coming across too much, you don't want it shallow, you want it to follow that line nice and straight. You want to get this corner as close as you can to that corner, nice clean line, and have a feel of your siding. If you've got the bit of material at the back there, you can kind of feel it halfway along. Just put this back in and manipulate a little bit, and this should help you push that down to the back, so you should have a nice flat surface on your facing there. So pull that up and one staple in at the top. So next, grab your material, make sure it's relatively flat. Just going to pull it that way a little bit. I'm going to get a couple of staples in, making sure obviously we're stapling in behind our rubber facing here and in as deep as you need to be for your particular table. And then obviously we've got a gap between this staple and this staple, so we can just pull up in towards that corner a little bit. One staple to finish. And so now we can go ahead and we can cut off our excess material. So again, just follow the shape outside your staples here. So we're going to follow that all the way along, just like we did before, and exactly the same on the other end. And for your final stage, exactly the same as we did when we were working on our end rails. Grab a piece of scrap cloth, and what we need to do is set in our feather strips, remembering to hit the feather strip so it's in the centre of the face of the hammer. That uses this to stop the feather strip going in too deep, and just work that across using some cloth to help protect the face here. So there we have it. We now have a nice finished side rail. And so there we have it. That is the process on how to recloth your rails. So we're going to carry on this process now, and we're going to be installing the main bed cloth on this table. And as I mentioned before, we do have a separate video for the installation of your bed cloth, as well as a full pool table installation video. So if you want to see this table installed in its entirety, we'll add links to those videos into the video description below for you. And also, please do remember to help support us here at Average Joe's Pool, and be sure to check out those Amazon links. You'll find all those Amazon links for the various different types of cloths at various different budgets, and all of the tools and gadgets that you see used in this video. So we hope that this video has been helpful for you? If it has, can you take 1 second out of your busy schedule? We always ask, at least can you be sure to hit that like button for us? It really helps us out. Likewise, whilst you're there, please do consider hitting that subscribe button and switching on notifications. We've got loads more great pool related content just waiting for you to check out, and loads more to come. And finally, if this video's really helped you out and you'd like to buy us a quick drink in return, then why not have a look at the super thanks option. So thank you very much for watching. We really appreciate it. We hope it's been helpful. We'll see you on the next video.